this. It's very easy to be discouraged in this business, isn't it? And I think it's fantastic that we have these events in order to encourage each other and have evangelists like Bill McKibben able to do that. Yesterday's Australian, King Coal still reigns. Very easy to be discouraged, isn't it? It's complete nonsense. There's hardly a single fact in that is right. It's all lies. And I want to just quickly go through and show you some surprising trends that indicate to me we are actually winning. Yeah, well, no, it's the problem always get. People like Mark Diesendorf and I started back there on Earth Day on this business, and only recently have I been able to see that it is possible to have that turnaround, that we actually can begin to see some trends that are pushing that way. On the IPCC, our report, which is being written by 250 people, is designed to try and help us get over that curve by 2020, that we actually will begin to see the peak in CO2 emissions by then. And that, as in Ghana, the countries of the world that have to lead the way will have the biggest reductions. It's a way still to see that happening in the US. Perhaps we're a little further down the track than them, but certainly in the European countries it's very clear that it's happening. We did have our moments of debate, and it was a pretty appalling time, wasn't it? But we did produce a package. I was at the IPCC in Korea when this came out, and it was tremendous interest shown, not because it was leading the world, you know, we're about number 50 on that, but the fact is that America will notice. This is really important in the global scene because America sees Australia as an ally in this. So hopefully it will begin to have that effect. But there's no doubt the agenda is being set in other parts of the world, particularly in Europe. Recently, at our meeting in Wellington, the Germans showed us their low-carbon economy roadmap, where they will have 80% less carbon by 2050 and how to get there, and 50% less car use. I've never seen any other country, any other place, actually have that as a goal. 100% carbon-free power, which they've closed the first 8 of their nuclear power plants and are going down the track of renewables. And all buildings will be rebuilt by 2050 to use 50% less energy. Pretty amazing goals and a roadmap to show how to do it. They're certainly way in front. Now I've been emphasising cities.
Conservative from Germany.
Well, it doesn't matter, actually.
That's great.
Yeah.
Even the Conservatives are pushing it.
Okay. My emphasis has been on cities, and the data I'm going to show you now is mainly on cities. But the book that I've written is about how they can change the world, and that Cities of Hope come from community-based organisations who drive governments and industry to change. And the examples we have in that book are all about that. We have zero carbon buildings happening. We have zero carbon precincts happening, like in Bedzed and Bourbon. We have zero carbon cities that are being planned, like in Masdar and in China. But let me show you some broader trends. And these are 3 trends that are about peaks. We heard all about peak oil last night. Well, that is happening actually. But we also have peak fossil fuel power investment, peak power consumption, peak car use and peak oil together. peak fossil fuel power investment. Now, King Coal still reigns. Well, have a look at the investment that is occurring in fossil fuels and how rapidly it is disappearing, and how extraordinary is the growth in investment in renewables. So that's what's actually happening in the world today. And they're scared. The fossil fuel industry is scared. They're getting put out of business.
Great.
And that is what... And it resulted, it takes a little while for investment to produce the goods, doesn't it? And in 2009, there were 80 gigawatts of renewables and 83 gigawatts of fossil fuel power plants, as in new power introduced. So what that shows also is that it's reasonably similar in cost. Now, the IEA, why we should be surprised about this, groups like the IEA have been predicting change, and it's usually no change. And in 2008, their prediction was that coal would build 64 gigawatts. They actually produced 14 gigawatts globally. So they were wrong. And in renewables in 2011, globally, there was a huge boost in solar. 36% growth because the price fell by 50% globally. That was the dominant investment area. Wind was 75 billion, and the smart energy systems that back it up, smart grids and so on, 19 billion. So it's happening. And the emerging green economies are clearly happening now in the developing world. So the light blue there, the growth is happening, and it's mostly in China and India, so it's in our region, but we're not doing a great deal of that. Now, Australia, this is the article, but in reality, investment last year, there was only 17% of power investment went into coal, 36% in gas, renewables was 47%, and yet the whole thrust of this article is that renewables is far too expensive, far too difficult, and it's going to fade away. Nonsense. The second thing is peak power consumption. In the UK now you can see how energy demand overall is going down, and in the household sector it's quite sharp. The reduction in total and per capita is happening. In Australia the same thing. We have peaked. It is beginning to reduce. Now that might be a GFC effect, but we apparently didn't get affected. The third thing is peak car use.
Did those numbers include solar and wind coming in? In other words, do they just reduce?
Yeah.
Or are they included in those numbers?
No, that's actual consumption, so including renewables.
Get off the grid.
Yeah. Sorry?
Consumption from the grid, not
yes, from the grid, yeah. Which is probably more important overall. Peak car use, we've been looking at this for some time, and we noticed a big reduction in car use in the period 95 to 2005 in the world cities, and then we found from that period on downturns occurring in many places in the world, and then very obviously in the US. 2004 was the peak. That's before the GFC. And it was about the time oil reached $80 a barrel. So we have the reduction there quite sharp, continuing down. So now we find public transport use going bananas, 7% growth in light rail, car use going down. That comes out every quarter and has continued. Same thing in Australia. So in 2004 you see the reduction in car use per capita in every Australian city, including Canberra and Hobart and Darwin, where there is no congestion causing these kind of problems, but every city. And this is after 100 years of growth. Decline has begun. And public transport, significant improvements everywhere. Sydney is a little bit just going up there? You've done virtually nothing in 20 years of talking about it. Melbourne's growth is amongst the fastest in the world, Brisbane and Perth as well. Canberra, Hobart and Darwin going down. So it does say you've got to have a decent option, and if you provide it, they will use it. Now, the good thing about this is if you begin to increase public transport, you get an exponential decline in car use. It's not one-to-one. So exponential growth starts to work in our favour as you begin to build up public transport. At the same time, densities are going up after 100 years of decline. The first time we can begin to track that, and density and transport fuel use are exponentially related too. So small increases in density, exponential declines in fuel use per capita. The same within the city. Now people say densities are going up, well surely there's a problem there. It's fantastic for fuel, but you have to manage how you do it. I've just come back from Singapore where they're doing what we call now biophilic urbanism, making dense urbanism green. And it's extraordinary the results in using green walls, green roofs, how you can bring biodiversity into dense cities. Even the KTP hospital, if you're doing anything going through Singapore, go and see KTP. It's got a beautiful garden, community garden on the roof, and the healing rates in this hospital are significantly higher because of the biophilic urbanism. Now, why is this car use going to keep going down? Because peak oil has happened. It is, this article was in Nature recently. It's very hard to get into Nature. And this was an article showing that the blue line there shows the actual production barrier. It's reached a limit. It's not going up. It's plateaued for some time. And because demand is still there, the price is going up. So we've got a 5% at least per annum growth in the price of fuel, and it is likely to keep going. The second thing is culture is changing. Most of this reduction in car use is with young people. All the up to the 30s and 40s there, the red line is showing car use going down quite dramatically. And us baby boomers still growing, can't get us out of our cars, but we're dying out. As Rod would like. The other thing about this is that younger people today are connected through their social media devices, and they work better in a train or a bus than in a car. So, who needs a car? Sometimes two devices. Richard Florida recently said, cars are so yesterday. Young and rich lead Douglas line. This is in the US of A, the car capital of the world. From 2001 to 2009, car use by this young group decreased from 10,300 miles to 7,900 miles a capita, a drop of 23%. How did it go up? Public transport 100%, biking 122%, walking 37%. This is not a small change. This is revolutionary, and we don't even hear about it. It is undermining the car industry, the oil industry, which, you know, have their power bases. What about the rest of the world, the emerging cities? We should be scared of China and India, right? They're going to take over. Shanghai. They started with the American model, built freeways. Then had a little problem. The dense cities of Asia very quickly filled with cars. So what did they do? They built the biggest metro in the world in 10 years. It covers 80% of the metro area, and there are 8 million passengers a day now using the metro. And why would you get a car and sit in a car park all day if you could use a shiny new metro? And that is what's happening. So now 82 Chinese cities are building metros, 14 Indian cities are building metros, and even the Middle Eastern cities are building them with all their oil. Now what about us? We don't hear much about what's happening here, but on Infrastructure Australia, it is extraordinary for me who's been the kind of radical trying to get people into rail for years, to find that benefit cost ratios on rail are the best. They are so much more attractive than building roads and even busways. So 55% of our budget went into urban rail for the first time from the federal government. You don't hear about this either, but it is an extraordinary change that's happening. As an example, our Southern Railway in Perth is running at record levels. It grew at 19% last year. 65,000 people a day now running down that. And this is the growth that we saw. The first big jump there was the Northern Rail, and the next the Southern Rail. Adelaide is about to do a similar thing with their rail system. It is entirely feasible to dramatically change cities if you build urban rail. And Sydney's chance is next. We have a plan that's now developing to develop light rail, and it's based on value capture as a way to build this rail system. In those centres around the rail station, that's where the green economy needs to emerge, and what we've found is that you can do it quite cheaply. All of these technologies can be done so you can build 55% less carbon urban developments for just $5,600 a dwelling. There is no reason why not to do it now. This is really about the next wave of innovation, the green economy, and it is something that is emerging around the world. But in South Korea is probably the best story of it. The president of South Korea has led this. He was the engineer who built that freeway over the top of the river, and 8 years ago was elected as the mayor of South Korea, of Seoul, and took it down and created this 10-kilometre long Central Park. Now, as the president, he says, if you want to picture the new green economy, picture the Chomachan. It has restored this river and created a beautiful area and took down a freeway to do it. That is our image that we need in the future. Thank you.